and no doubt more people will join as we go. So let me start with the normal caveats now that we're recording. First, our website, our Facebook group is private, though I don't really know how private a group can be with 10,000 members in it, but it's private as it is. These videos are public. They're posted on public sessions. Any questions you have, anything that is suggested is going to be available publicly. We make that known. Also, because we do these things less regularly in the summer, and we haven't done a video session for some weeks now, just to update you guys, come September, we'll be back to our normal schedule of doing one every 3 weeks or so. That's usually what we do. We'll have some exciting guest lectures for the fall. We have a couple of people who have opted to speak, who have taken some Supreme Court cases directly on areas of concern to us. I'm excited about the lineup that we're kind of putting together. And so you can look forward to the fall sessions starting in earnest very shortly. I'd also mention a big thank you. Of course, we are approaching on, I haven't checked the numbers in some time, but I know that we're approaching on 10,000 active members on our forum. And that's really a credit to each and every one of you that have invited your friends and have made this place a dynamic place. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. So let's talk, if you don't mind. Sorry, I'm just going to mute you. There we go. If you guys can put yourself on mute so we can get started. First, I'm going to admit to a lie. And that is that I said we're going to be constructing a residential pro forma from scratch. Unfortunately, I only have 45 minutes or so today, and I'm going to be relying on the one we constructed from scratch last time. I'm going to go through it in some detail and show you the math behind it. So I'm cheating a little bit, please excuse me. So let's talk firstly about the purpose of today, and then I'm going to get right into the meat. Your residential agents. And sometimes the sale of a house is a very simple and compelling value proposition for someone. I have kids. I want them to live in this neighborhood. I want them to have a good life. Easy. For that, people will pay anything. They'll pay anything because they want to live a certain lifestyle, and they'll make it happen. It's not a financial decision. It's a family decision. Other times, however, people are investing in properties, particularly in residential real estate. And those people need the math and the mathematical understanding of why it is that they're doing so. And with respect, and the greatest of respect, to both real estate agents and lawyers, our industry isn't actually known for being mathematically savvy. That's not to say that commercial agents don't have sophisticated pro formas and understand this stuff backwards and forwards. Many of them do. But many of us, particularly on the residential side, particularly those of us starting out, don't have basic Excel skills. And I'm speaking for myself too, by the way. When I did my MBA, which was after I had graduated law school and after I had gone ahead and practiced law for some years, they said, okay, open up Excel. And I had to be explained that that was the green one. So to be very clear, there are many of us, myself included, who have somewhat opted for professions that don't necessarily require math competency and financial math competency. And as a result, trying to explain to someone why it is that they should be investing in a residential product is difficult, but it shouldn't be impossible. And it is within your competence. And what's more, you're going to understand what it is that I'm saying today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn my attention to this spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do in this spreadsheet is I'm going to show you how it is that you can convince someone that the return on this is better than the return on a comparable investment. Because after all, if you think about it from an investor's perspective, to sway someone into buying real estate, you need to convince them that the return from real estate is better than the return from anything else. Okay, how do you do that? Well, this morning is going to be the answer to that question. So let's first of all, can someone just confirm for me that you can see my screen and that it's clear and that that's not scrunched up? You guys can see what's here?
Yes, all good.
Okay, excellent. So my residential pro forma is actually going to be very easy. It consists of 3 basic tabs. You see these tabs at the bottom? And these tabs, just so you know how Excel works, usually people who use Excel well keep the front page. That's the presentation page. That's the page that really allows you to put in your inputs and see your outputs and everything else. The remaining tabs are the underlying calculations upon which this front page relies. Because if, for instance, in my taxation schedule, I have a tax rate,
Morning.
then I am absolutely, if I have this as a tax rate, then I am absolutely able to draw from this and bring it into my front sheet. That's the way Excel works. And I know that for many people of you, that will be a very basic understanding, but let's recall that some people may not have that understanding. So I'm going to start slowly. So the two backup tabs that I have to make this work is the taxation schedule for Canada and the mortgage calculator. Why do I have those? Well, when you are trying to convince someone to invest in a property and you want to show them what their return is, you may very well want to show them what their after-tax return is, particularly if they're foreign investors, right? They're sitting there saying, well, I'm living in Dubai, I don't pay tax on this investment, but here, if I do this, I'm going to have to pay capital gains. What does it net me at the end of the day? And in order to figure that out, you really need the marginal tax rates associated with the transaction. We'll talk about that in a second. Similarly, you need a mortgage calculator. This is a basic mortgage calculator, and it allows for Canadian mortgages, which are semi-compounded annually. To remind you, just so that we're clear, in America, mortgages are compounded once a year. In Canada, they're compounded twice. What does that mean? Well, it's a way the banks screw you. So when a bank says that they're offering you 3.9%, or let's say 3%, if you borrow $100 from them, if it was compounded annually at the end of the year, you would end up paying them $3 on that $100 because it's 3% interest. But if you compound semi-annually, then at the 6-month mark, you take $1.50 and add it to the 100. And then for the remainder of the 6 months, from July to December, you then have to charge 3% interest, not on $100, but $101.50. And in that way, the banks charge more interest than if they just compounded annually. So this is a semi-annually compounded calculator, which is the way all Canadian banks measure their, except for privates, measure their mortgages. That's pursuant, by the way, to the Bank Act or the Mortgages Act. Okay, let's talk a bit more generally about how this calculator works. I like to organize my Excel so that this is very clear and transparent. In blue, you will see inputs. That is to say, you can touch those. And in yellow, you will see outputs. That is to say, this is the crucial data that we are looking for from the event. And so technically, what should happen is that if we are able to input our inputs, we should be able to get out the outputs, which give us the numbers, the critical numbers we're looking for. And that most critical number of all is how much of a return am I making on the money I am investing? That is the purpose behind this spreadsheet. I'm going to pause for a second. Does that make sense so far? Does anyone have any questions before I go into the details? Okay. So let's talk about the assumptions that are required in order to figure out what the return on investment is. The first factor is going to be intimidating for most of you. It's going to be intimidating because none of you, well, not none of you, many of you have heard of this, but many of you have not heard of a discount rate. That may be an unfamiliar term to you. It is a basic financial math concept that states that that money is discounted every year by 3% that it is held onto. So $100 today is worth 3% less, $97 tomorrow. Why? Because of inflation. And because the value of $1 today is not the value of $1 tomorrow. Now, a discount rate doesn't need to be 3%. A discount rate can be anything, but 3% is a reasonable, healthy discount rate and that is roughly what CPI is, if you will, Consumer Price Index. That is to say, inflation goes up by about 2 or 3% per year. And what that means is that if you buy a trampoline today for $100, it will cost you $103 next year. That is to say, discount rate in that instance is 3%. And it's really critical that any analysis that you have a discount rate. You'll see why as we go through our math. But the reason fundamentally that it is required is because you're holding property for a given period of time. And $100,000 in year 6 is not the same thing as $100,000 in year 1. And so you have to have a value associated with the declining value of your dollar. And that is what a discount rate is. Everything else you should understand. You can certainly appreciate what a real estate appreciation rate is. That's the amount that real estate goes up per year. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, 10% per year. If you try to say to an investor that they're going to get 10% per year on real estate investment, you'll be laughed out of the venue. And the reason you'll be laughed out of the venue is not because real estate hasn't gone up 10% per year, but when you're doing a pro forma, you're supposed to be assuming for conservative projections. And conservative projections has had real estate go up by about 5 to 6% per year since World War II. Sure, we've been in an exceptional rate of growth, but no one and their dog should be predicating an analysis on the expectation that we're going to have the heady growth of the past 2 years continue on forward. So I think a real estate appreciation rate of 6% makes some good sense to me. But, you know, we can say 5%, we can say 6%. Let's be conservative, because you always want to appear conservative to your investors. You want to say, in a worst case scenario, take a look at what my return is going to be. Then we have our marginal rate of tax. So let's talk a bit about how tax works, because many of you know that tax works by calling your accountant and then paying an amount of money at the end of the day. But actually in Canada, we have a graduated tax system. And what that means is on income, let's just use this column here. Everyone, whether you're Jeff Bezos, well, I guess he's not Canadian, but whether you're Mitch Goldhar or whether you're Mark Morris, you pay 20% on the first $44,470. That's the way it works. On the next amount, the amount between 44,740 and 48,000, so the next $1,000 or so, you pay 24%. On the amount above 48,000 but below 79,000, you pay 29%, and so on and so forth, until you get to the top tax bracket, where over $220,000, you pay 54% interest. Those of us who remember watching Michael Jackson moonwalk for the first time, and even actually older than that, can recall a time but 10 years ago when the top tax bracket in Ontario was actually 43%. And that could be enough to cause people to just explode, because this is an extra 10% going into people's pocket. While this isn't the course of what, or isn't the purpose of what we're talking about today, I would point out to you that what has happened in the past 10 years is that all of these brackets were greatly moved up. In that people who earn under $220,000 a year have had massive tax breaks. And by putting a tax rate of 54% of over $220,000, those same people who are earning $220,000 got those tax breaks, but for every extra dollar that they take on, they pay it. So we're taxing wealthy people more today than we were 10 years ago when the tax brackets were scrunched. This is a highly politicized thing, just so you are aware. And I don't know why I'm pointing that out to you, but what the hell? This is not a law talk, so I'm allowed to kind of go off on any number of tangents, I guess. So the marginal rate of income tax refers to the rate of tax that you are in for every new dollar you take in. So let's say you work for a big, I don't know, company. Let's say you're I don't know, the owner of a business, and you earn $400,000 a year. If you have a real estate investment that you are adding to that income, then every dollar you take in will be subject to the marginal rate of tax. And the marginal rate of tax for you will be 53.53%. And as a result, in almost all instances where you're selling property in a given year and paying tax on it, because usually your profit is going to push you over that amount, your marginal tax rate is usually in the top tax bracket. So let's call it 53.53%. Remember I said pages can pull from other pages? So this page is pulling directly from this one right over there. It's pulling that line there. And of course, if that's your marginal rate of tax, your marginal rate of capital gain is in fact half of that, or 26.76%. So every single dollar that I make as a capital gain is taxed at 26.76%. I'm going to stop for a minute. I know many of you are familiar with this. I know some of what I'm saying is repetitive, but I just want to go into some detail. The difference between income tax and capital gain is, and I'm going to use the example I've used on our forum several times before, and I don't know why I like picking on Mr. Chudley, but I sure as heck do, so I'm going to do so again. And this is like the one example I seem to just keep on coming back to while explaining tax. I don't know what Mr. Chudley has ever done to me. I really enjoyed his farm as a kid, but anyways, I'm going to pick on him. Mr. Chudley runs an apple farm. Mr. Chudley sells apples. There happen to be poisonous and ruinous apples. That's what the white stuff is all over them. But at the end of the day, I should be careful. This is a public talk, as I said at the very beginning. So they're deliciously poisonous and ruinous apples. When a child brings a bag of apples to Mr. Chudley's cash register and pays $20 for the bag, which is more than it would cost in the grocery store, good on you, Mr. Chudley, capitalism at work. Mr. Chudley, because he earns a lot of money, has to pay 54% tax on that. Why? Because he's at the marginal tax bracket of 54%. Highest tax bracket. He's earned over $220,000 in the year. Right up the street from Mr. Chudley, there is a Christmas tree farm, and they sell trees. And they sell trees. I'm Jewish. I have no idea what Christmas trees go for, but let's assume that they go for 20 bucks per tree. And when they cut those trees down and they make their $20, they too have to pay tax, the marginal rate of tax of 54%. One day, Mr. Chudley wakes up and decides that he's sick and tired of poisoning Ontario's children and decides to cut down his trees, and he sells his trees for $20 a pop. When he does not need to pay the marginal rate of income tax because the trees themselves were used to produce the income, that is to say apples. And unlike the Christmas trees, which were the product itself, the apple trees are the product that produced the income, the apples. And thus, it's taxed at capital gains rate, 26.76%. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because in a real estate context, if you think about it, when you are when you are taking in income in the form of rents, that is taxed at your marginal rate of income tax. And that's the apples. And when you sell your product, you're selling the apple tree, and thus it is a capital gain. That's the difference between income and capital gain. And again, it's a very political decision to choose to tax income at 54% and tax capital at 26%. Because what we're effectively doing is we're penalizing work and we're rewarding investment. It's fine. There's a whole range of arguments for it. I'm not trying to say you should do it or not. I'm just saying that's the way the system is structured and you need to understand it. Okay. In addition, there's a cost of borrowing. So if I borrow from my line of credit, they're going to borrow in order to buy this product, right? Like in some way, they're going to be borrowing. Let's say that you have to put down a deposit of $100,000 on a property. You will effectively be borrowing, or cost of borrowing, or loss of money, of use of funds, right? Because if you put down $100,000, you're either going to borrow it from a line of credit, which means you have to pay money on it, or you're going to allocate it to this project, which means you're not going to be earning interest that you would ordinarily earn with $100,000. One way or the other, there is an amount of money that is going to be lost. And what that rate is usually prime plus half or whatever it is. That's usually how people afford these things. And then, of course, you have your realtor fees. Your mortgage assumptions are, of course, your 80% is going to be what you put down. Your mortgage on investment property is usually 80% or more, or less that the bank lends. Your mortgage rate, your amortization period, your term. I'm assuming all of you understand what those terms are because we deal with those every single day of our life. And then we have the mill rate. So what's the mill rate? So I don't know how many of you go onto I'm assuming you're on your MLS every single day, but when you're on MLS, you will see that there's public records, and public records has the assessed value that MPAC, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, ascribes to a property on a daily basis, on an annual basis. And if you take that assessed value and you multiply it by a municipality's mill rate, you get the actual amount of the taxes payable to the municipality at the end of the day. So Toronto's mill rate as of last year was 0.5997040. So if the assessed value of your home is say 1.5, you take $1.5 million and you multiply that by 0.05997040, and that will give you what your tax rate is on the property, which is very helpful because your tax rate will be reassessed based on the amount that you're about to pay for your property, which is always going to be more than someone else has paid for the property. And then you have your property. It's not assumptions, that's wrong. It's the property inputs, right? It's not the assumption. So what's your purchase price? What's your land transfer tax? What's your closing cost? How long do you plan to own the property? What the condo fees are, MISC, and monthly rents. Once you've assembled all that information, we can now finally turn to how do we use it and how do we get an output. The purpose of the output, I remind you again, is to figure out what the return on my investment is year over year. Let's turn our attention to that analysis. So the first thing we need to discover, and this is all done automatically, the outputs, but I'm going to explain how it comes about and where this math comes from. Well, the first thing we need to understand is what the true purchase capital investment is. So to do that, you have to figure out what your true purchase cost is. And you may think that your purchase cost is $550,000, but it is not. Because you've also had to pay your land transfer tax. And you've also have to pay your closing costs, which, by the way, is usually the lawyer. Yay, the lawyer! Never complain about paying your lawyer. In fact, always offer your lawyer double. That's a general rule in life. Quibble aside, if you add these three things up, you get the total purchase cost, which is the true purchase cost of $558,975. Of course, you aren't providing that full amount of money. The bank is providing the amount of money. And by the way, that's the reason why real estate is such a brilliant investment. It's because of the beauty of leverage. The bank is providing $440,000, not you. And how do I get the 440? Well, I basically figure out that 80% of 550 at a rate of 2.1 in 25 years, this is all coming from the calculators, right? Like these amounts are being pulled from my original source, and you'll see that these outputs come as a result. And because of that, we now know that the bank is providing $440,000. Fine. If that's the case, then the true amount that you've had to pay to get into this property is $118,975. That is your investment. That is the amount you have paid upon which you need to have a return. You can take $118,000 and invest in this product, or you could take 118,000 and invest in Amazon stock. That is the math. That we haven't talked about how to get the outcome. That's the beginning part. Fine. Okay, let's move on. There's effectively two different benefits that we need to figure out. First is the cash flow. Okay, and the cash flow, it's funny. I remember when I started my MBA, everyone was talking about cash flow, and cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. I never really understood what they meant. I don't know why I didn't understand what they meant. It's a pretty simple concept, but it never really clicked. So I'm just going to stress it. Cash flow is the amount of money that needs to come out of your pocket at the end of the day. It doesn't make a difference how much money you're making if fundamentally you don't have the money to sustain your investment. Your investors need to know what this is going to cost on a monthly basis. And so in this instance, you have a monthly mortgage cost. What's the monthly mortgage cost? Well, it's 1,884. Where does it come from? It comes from my mortgage calculator, right? All these inputs has created this output. And if you want to see the math behind it, all the math is contained at the top of the screen. I'm just using a basic payment function. It's not worth me going into how I did this, except to say that if you explore it as you download this spreadsheet, you'll figure it out. And if you have any questions, I'm of course available to discuss it. So next, so that's one output. And because it's an output, because it's a cash outlay, we put it in negative. Then we have the condo fees. Okay, well, we have to pay the condo fees of $350 a month. I don't like $350 a month. $350 a month seems like it's a bit odd. Let's call it $450 a month. By the way, you'll note I changed $450 here and I changed it over here. I did not put it in here because this is the input section. And then I have my miscellaneous charges of $100 a month. Okay. I mean, it's a condo. Who knows what that will be, but something's going to happen. Light fixture is going to need repair, whatever. And then I get my tax payment. Where does my tax payment come from? Well, again, I simply take my purchase price, $550, and I'm multiplying it by my mill rate, and I'm dividing by 12, right? That's how I get my tax payment. I don't use the tax payment, by the way, that they are providing. Why? Because the purchase price means that within a year or two, MPAC is going to come around and reassess the property higher. Because the purchase price is a fundamental component of how MPAC does that. So your tax payments are $274.86. Now, honestly, hold on a second. Where's hold on? Why is that F12? Hold on. Where's F12? Oh, okay. So that's where it is. I'm sorry. This is where I am. $274.86. And if I were to be actually a bit more accurate, I can multiply that by 0.8. The reason being that MPAC, when they reassess, usually reassesses for 80% of the value of the purchase price. So I've made this better now. There it is. It's more accurate towards taxes. In fact, just to be a bit conservative, I'm going to say 0.85. There we go. Then we have the rents, okay? Because we're doing this on an investment basis. So I'm assuming that there's going to be rents that come in from the property. And the rents in this instance, monthly rents are now, let's say, $2,200 for a unit like this. That seems about right to me, given the purchase price in Mississauga, somewhere else. And the borrowing down payment. So you remember I told you that you're borrowing $118,975, whether it's in cash that's sitting in a checking account that you're not using in the marketplace, or whether you're borrowing from a line of credit. In both instances, you're tying up money, and you have to account for that tie up of money. And thus, it is the case that your borrowing down payment is going to cost you $272. That is to say, this amount times the cost of borrowing use of funds divided by 12. And on that basis, you find that a purchase price of $550,000 in Toronto with monthly rents of $2,200 will lose you $740.77 a month. That is to say, you will have to pay $740 every single month that you hold on to this condo. At this point, the investors are saying, well, to hell with this, that isn't that great. And some of them really may want to have it be equal. And in that case, you're going to have to do something along the lines of finding how to get an income stream of about $3,000. The moment you get $3,000, you can see that you actually are break even, right? But we're going to assume for now that we're sticking at $2,200. Let's just keep it like this. Because sophisticated investors understand that cash flow isn't everything. In fact, there is a true monthly cost that we haven't captured in the cash flow benefit. Because if you take a look, we have the same monthly mortgage, same condo fee, the same miscellaneous, same tax payments, same rent, same cost of borrowing. But you'll recall that because the monthly mortgage amount consists of both your principal repayment and your interest payment, when you pay $1,884, a portion of that is being paid to you. It's being paid to your account, the principal repayment. And so if we're to understand the true cost per month, we have to add back the amount that we are paying ourselves, the principal repayment. And we find that even though I'm down $740.77, because every month I am paying myself $1,117, the true cost of holding on to this is actually $377.06. This matters for people who have deep pockets because they don't care if they're losing $740 if you can verifiably show them that they are actually making $377 per month on this, which indeed they are. So that analysis is really designed to show people what it will look like on a monthly basis. But of course, that doesn't inform us of what the internal rate of return on the investment is. It doesn't inform us of what we're going to make per year by holding on to the property. Why? Well, because it doesn't deal with the fundamental idea of why we're investing in the first place, which is the fact that real estate appreciation takes place at 5 or 6% per year. And it takes place on the full purchase price, not just the capital investment. And this is where the beauty of residential real estate investment comes in. And so we turn our attention to, well, okay, how much money am I making per year? In addition to the $377 I'm making per month, how much am I making per year? Well, we have made an assumption that we're going to hold on to a property for 5 years. Okay, that seems reasonable. Fair enough. What does that mean? Well, we know that if the purchase price is $550, and we know that we're holding on to the property for 5 years, and we know that there's a real estate appreciation of 5% on the whole value of the money. Well, okay, that's pretty simple. All we do is we take 550, we multiply it by 1.05, and we put it to the power of 5%, and we get our new sale price, the sale price that we can project in 5 years' time. Another way of thinking about it is taking 500,000 and then adding 5%, and then taking whatever that amount is, 525, and adding 5%, and then doing that 5 years in a row. And that will bring us to $701,000. So what's our profit? Well, our profit is your sale price minus your purchase cost, not your purchase price, minus your purchase cost. And then we subtract our realtor fee, which has HST. And as a result, and then we add on the accrued detriment or benefit of ownership. What does that mean? Well, you know this number, every single month, you're paying yourself $377. Well, you got to realize that at the point of sale. So if it's a negative, if say this is 1,700, then this becomes a true benefit net loss every single month. And thus you have to subtract that from the value gain. But again, we're feeling 2,200, which seems reasonable. And as a result, every month we're making about $400. And that amount has to be accounted for when you sell, because that's what you're getting back. And as a result, your gross profit is your sale price, is your profit minus your realtor fee plus the accrued benefit of the principal repayments, and that equals your gross profit. And that gross profit means that you have a pre-tax return on investment of 105%, which means nothing because that's done over many years. So you have to divide that by the number of years, and you discover that your annual return on investment is 21.17%. Is that an error? That seems high, Mark. What's going on? I speak to myself. Well, it's not high. It's not high because you made appreciation on $550,000. This is the beauty of leverage, even though you only put down 100. So it's not like you took 100 and then made 5% appreciation on that. You made 5% appreciation on the 550, including the bank's money. That's where the beauty of real estate is. That's why people invest. And as a result, because you made it on the full amount of the investment, the return on the investment on an annualized basis is about 20%. Fine, Mark, but in Dubai, I don't pay tax, and here I do. Help me out. What's my true return after tax? Well, after tax, you simply take your, where is it? Your after tax is very simple. You take your amount, your gross profit, and you multiply it by your marginal tax rate. There you go. And as a result, you have an annualized return on investment of 10% if you're paying income tax. If you are the Christmas tree farmer, if you bought the product specifically to sell it. But if you were like most people and you bought the product to rent it out, which indeed is the case of this pro forma, and as a result, you're selling the apple trees, not the Christmas trees, and it's a capital gain, well, then you take this amount and you multiply that by the 26%, and then you get the return on investment, which you divide by the number of years, and we're seeing a 15% return on money. And here's where the power of these spreadsheets are. Because at this point, you can now turn to your investor and say, yes, Amazon stock has gone up 10% per year. And that's pretty damn good. And you could take your $120,000 and invest in that. But if you invest with me, I'm going to make you 15% per year, and here's why. And suddenly, you're comparing apples to apples. And suddenly, you can get them to bite on your investment. So, it's 10:40. I have to end at 10:45 today, unfortunately. I'm sorry, guys. It's a very busy day for me. Can I open this up to questions for the next 5 minutes? And yes, this will be available. I will post this shortly in the forum, hopefully later on this afternoon, but possibly tonight. And it will have the spreadsheet so that you can download it to your heart's content and start working with this. Does anyone have any other questions for me?
I just want to thank you, Mark. I think this was real easy to understand, great clarity. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this presentation. It's great. Oh,
it's a pleasure, Andrew. That's why we're all part of the forum, and I'm thrilled to have you guys here and everyone who participates.
Thank you.
There are a couple of chats. Let me see. Oh, okay. No, that's just thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate it. All right, guys. So let's call this a day. Everyone, I'll have this spreadsheet up later on. I'll have the video posted later on, and then you can kind of go through this at your heart's content. Again, thank you very much for attending, and I'll see you all on the forum.
Mark, can I ask you one question regarding a cost of maintenance fees for condos or repair costs for freeholds? Is there anywhere that we can include this?
Well, I mean, you can amend this as necessary, right? Like
Right.
I just did out a basic sort of, hey, this is what you should be gearing for your clients. That's kind of what I was doing here. It's more like you can make this much more detailed than I've made it, and you could theoretically have the condo fees escalating year over year, right? As they often do. You can have tax rates differentials. You can do all sorts of things. But the goal here is really to put you on a track where you start understanding what you should be explaining to your investors, not just looking at this and saying, aha, holy grail, this is all I'm going to use, right? The goal is familiarize yourself with this and then start amending.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, very good.
Mark,
Yeah.
This is Art. Quick question. The vacancy rates, we assume we're going to rent it from day one, but in the fact, in the condo market, for example, can take a couple of months if you insist on your price. Can you elaborate?
Totally. Vacancy rate is part of a normal pro forma. Again, I made this up on the fly. I didn't think to include vacancy rates, which is included in every type of pro forma and should be there. I mean, one way of dealing with it is to just lower your monthly rents by, say, 1/12, if you will, to account for one vacancy. Another way of doing it more properly is to account for vacancy rates and to amend this to include, because yes, that is a factor in this, and sophisticated investors will expect to see it. Again, setting you out on that direction, please use the spreadsheet to your heart's content and amend as necessary.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, my best, and thank you very much for everyone.